Hello,
Wait,
Jennifer. How are you doing?
I'm I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. We just briefly debriefed. It's
Mhm.
great to see you. You and I worked together some years ago in a production of Eight. I remember you did the choreography for Eight piece. It was wonderful. So it's nice to see you again. And thank you for joining us in this conversation about performing human rights. So, please tell us something about your work, where you are now, just
Mhm.
to introduce yourself to us.
Sure, sure. Thank you for inviting me to do this. So my name is Jennifer Harge. I am a dance artist, dance maker, performance maker. I'm based in Detroit. Um, I make performances in dance works as a solo artist on myself and also with my collective Harge Dance Stories, also based in Detroit. I founded that collective in 2014, basically as a way in which to create a container to keep creating. It was a way to hold myself accountable to choreographic making. Um, and so as a solo artist and inside the group, we think a lot about Black rituals, um, thinking about ways to plan for the future, but like using we already know from our past or like using our families' histories, Black culture more largely, and thinking about how we can like use that information from the past or what's living in our bodies um, as a resource. And we try to think about how performance can help us imagine new ways of living or other ways of living.
So you were in Detroit when the coronavirus became a pandemic. So what happened to you as an artist, and how did the specifically the city of Detroit manage this crisis? So something about the political construct of your city and how it is going now.
So I feel like while I know that Detroit is a really vulnerable spot inside of this pandemic, um, like I know that because the news is telling us that, and I know that because like to walk, but I feel like my actual um neighborhood, like it doesn't feel that different. It's different to see people with masks. So like the sight of it is is still triggering to me. But I don't like sense it like narrowing in on me in the way that I would imagine it would feel like if I was only receiving information through a news broadcast. Um, I know that this is happening around us, but like I feel safe. People in my home are safe. People are healthy, and that thankfully, but I I don't sense it in like in a panic mode necessarily, even though like I know the numbers are high. Of course, we're like doing all the precautions to keep ourselves safe. But so it's weird to talk to people who aren't here. They're like, "Are you okay?" And it's like you're really worried. I'm just like, "Oh yeah, I'm fine." I mean, like health wise, I'm fine. One thing I did that has been interesting for me inside of this though is like how my energy levels go and my creative energy goes in waves. So I feel the impact on my body that way. Um, like the first week or two of quarantine, I was just like on this high, like this creative high. And I was just like imagining and seeing all these things for the future and like calling all my artist friends and just excited. And then I would say the last 3 or 4 weeks have been a real lull. Just like no interest in doing anything. Um, Even when I try to like open any kind of book, I can maybe read a half a page and then my brain can't quite settle down enough. So I think that is a result, or like an effect of COVID, is that like it kind of interrupts, well, of course it's interrupting people's lives, but the ways in which the outside energy interrupts my like mental capacity to focus or to be inspired by things for any like length of time. I'm slowly coming out of that lull, I think. Because I have a friend, the beautiful thing about Detroit is that it's a lot of like under the radar, underground kind of performance spaces. And so I have a friend with this warehouse type event space. And I have a portable sprung dance floor that I bought for the last show that I made. And so I can set up shop there next week. And so I feel like that will start to help me figure out something. I should figure out how to move forward. Because I haven't had that impulse to do anything.
So do you think that having a place where to work, you talked about warehouse, sprung floors, or a dance floor, will contribute to move past this law? So the geographical and the physical container can help stimulate.
Yeah. I do, because I used to be able to actually make a lot of things in the house without, like, I could have I could practice choreography, I could plan class in the living room very comfortably, and I haven't been able to do that since this started. And so I do feel like I need to have just one place where I can go practice something and learn what the practice is when I'm in it. One thing I've been thinking a lot about even prior to now was like how to be thinking about, or like what there was the responsibility of performance and theater in terms of like how do we help dismantle systems of oppression. And so now, and that's always what we were thinking about in our performance work with Harge and stories, and in any kind of situation I'm in where I'm working with a cast of performers. And so now I feel like because performance will be so different, but the responsibility I think is still the same, but I think how we make performances, we'll have to practice a new way of making. And so I think part of what I'm interested in when I have a space is to start thinking through that, what that would mean. Because I've thought about it in a theoretical way, because what am I trying to say? Like, I thought about it before the thing broke, and now we're in the break. And so like how we plan for the future now, like we have new information about how to move forward. This thing is breaking down.
So,
does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. You say a couple of things that I want to a little bit focus our conversation, So you talked about the performance as a way, as you were talking about performance that you have done up to this point, as a way to plan for the future. Because live probably a different life, if not a better life, right? And now at this moment, you talked about also this idea, or also connected with your past. This is what I heard. So finding ways to dismantle instances of oppression. And I would like to talk to you to know more about that. And also, this is one point I would like to focus on. The other one is that performance will be different, practicing new way of making, which is something that I am very curious as an artist myself. That's what we are all trying to figure out. What's this? And then you said something that I actually would like for you to address this first. You said the thing broke. What is that? So the thing broke.
So
impression, new ways of performing. Those are,
I know, right? Let's just solve this real quick.
This is important.
So the one thing I think that this moment is teaching a lot of people is that like the ways in which the system we were operating inside of, like capitalist systems being, we can have that as like, we can name that as one thing. And like how fragile that they really are. And so, and I think for a lot of people that wasn't really made clear prior to now. And so as I see those, like certain, I think about even like cultural institutions that won't make it past this time, which I think there's like a mourning for a thing that we used to know as a place to gather or to experience art. But I have to always like think about what those spaces held, like what were they holding on to that didn't serve people actually, like how did they uphold anti-Blackness, how did they uphold, you know, homophobic ideas, how did they uphold, you know, like a capitalist structure that only asks us to produce and never give us time to really be in process. Like what was it actually holding? And now that it's gone and breaking down, like how do we understand we were all a part of that, all complicit in how systems were operating? And so now that those are like beginning to crumble, I'm thinking about how there's this book I was reading called The Undercommons. It's actually, I'm going to go grab it because it's sitting right here. I'm going to just show you the cover.
Yes.
And I've read pieces of it before. The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study. I'll send you a link. But there's this piece in it that I read yesterday, and in the introduction, and they're like, you know, when you're, I'm paraphrasing, I'm probably gonna butcher this, but the what I gathered from it is like, I used to be thinking about how to plan for like after the break, but the buildings, for instance, they're still up, so I can't actually see what was gonna be on the other side. I can only imagine what we might do when we get there. But now that things are starting to fall, like then your vision expands because you now see what you could actually do when you cross to the other side. But I have to practice that. I've never been in a space where these cultural institutions didn't exist. Like we knew there were going to be universities, and now universities are in trouble, right? And so like if those things begin to crumble and that system begins to break, when I step on the other side of that, now I have like a new landscape to navigate. And so I have to then plan for that space. And so that's what I'm trying to think about when I go into the studio space, whenever I decide to start doing that, like how do you plan, and like what do you make, and what do people need to see when they go to a performance? And I know that there are people who prior to now would make like dance for dance sake, or theater for theater's sake, or art for art's sake. And I don't think there will be time for that, like after this, you know what I mean? Like people, I think there's like, we're gonna need to have something that's gonna help us make it through to the other side. And so how do we then make like a space for folks to practice that? Because none of us ever been here before. We won't know how to do it. That's what I'm thinking about in terms of like what the break is, and then how to see past the break.
So how will the practicing, because you mentioned practicing new ways of making performance. Now, in this moment, we know that for the next, in the future, at least for the next year, probably, it's going to be difficult to get people to the theater. Just because there is so much fear of being in the same place.
Sure.
And, you know, although I hope that's not the case, but we know this is going to happen. So how you practice this new way of making performance. Because when we practice, generally, as artists, and I think it's your case too, but then you maybe you disprove me. We do think about the audience.
Mm-hmm.
You said we don't not making this for that sake. It's not going to be the case. Now we have to see how we're going to get to the other side, right? So how we create and practice new ways of creating, and where is our audience?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Audience also means this dialogue between the performer and someone watching and listening and witnessing the performance, but also means financial support because they pay a ticket, right? So can we briefly?
Yeah. And yeah, I don't know what the practice will look like. I haven't started practicing yet. I just can only like dream. I mean, my first thought is dreaming about just being in practice again after like a 3 to 4 week time span of not having energy to do that. But I think also in April, my plan was going to be to have like a homemade residency time for myself prior to summer engagements. And I didn't do that because, as I told you, I just really couldn't get myself going. But I think artists will need time to like reconfigure our relationship to our practices in our relationship to performance. And so one thing I'm going to be thinking about trying to push for is like, how then do institutions or foundations after like give artists time to be practicing? It's like, give us time to be in process, because the ways we used to make and the way we used to consider performance making would be so drastically different. And so I don't even want to get to this answer about like how to make a thing for an audience yet. I would want to take it some steps prior and think about how to even just like, what do I even think about in dance right now? Like, what is even important for me to make for myself? And I want to spend some time in that before I think about like inviting others to watch.
So it's in a way you're saying that it's kind of a return to the basics, really, and to then start to rebuild something. And as an artist, as you rebuild something, the audience and the way you can reach the audience will be incorporated, will be part of the creative process.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And I also I think about this. There was some article like at the very beginning of Corona cases in the States, and there was, I can't remember where I read this, artists talking about like how things will shift. And I didn't dismiss the article, but I was annoyed because it just felt so soon. Like we just got into this situation and people were already talking about how the future would look, but we hadn't lived in this now. And so I'm just trying to give myself permission to like not have a product in any way anytime soon, and to not like be like force myself to have an answer about how I should move now, because I have no idea. In the practice that I was doing even 6 months ago, that alone took years before you like are comfortable and understand how you work and how you make choices. And so I feel like it will take me some years, and it's probably going to take like some failures, like some real failures. And I have to I think I have to be okay with knowing that the process moving forward will just be a trial and error.
So this is one of the discourses that I heard from other artists. Mm-hmm. Something happened that broke the thing, and we have to restart from the beginning. But my question is this: are we overreacting, or is that really happening?
We said the last part.
Or is this something that really happened? Or are we as artists, because we are more sensitive, I don't know, are overreacting to the thing? Is this real?
Mm.
And this is a more political statement that I'm trying to involved with in this moment.
I don't think it's an overreaction. Like I mean, I don't make, so for myself personally, I never made things for large groups anyway. It was always like a very intimate kind of relationship to audiences. But I do think, like, audiences aside, I think I can see it, but I can't formulate the words. Like the work is about to change, and I don't know what that's going to mean for every artist, but what is that? I think too, this is maybe not the most PC thing to say, but like, I think for some people too who were doing dance for dance sake, or you know what I mean, making dances about kitchen sinks, that you realize that like that it won't be enough to put on a stage. I think there's something about a stage time that is it's precious, and it's serious, and it is political. And I think that people have like become politicized overnight because they all of a sudden had to, where there have been other folks who have always been political because their lives, they're like their actual beings are political. And so I think for a lot of folks who like chose just to kind of dismiss that as a reality, all of a sudden then had to be part of the conversation. And so I think then your art will change if your politics change. And so I think like that, feeling that shift in your body and in your creative practice does make you, you know what I mean? You do feel that in your gut. And so, I mean, are we overreacting about audiences and people coming to shows and like everything starting from scratch? I think maybe a little. I don't plan on starting from step one when I get to the studio, because we do know some stuff. Like, as people who have been in the art practice, you know, we know we know a lot. But I do think like we have to pivot probably, or like it's like it's prismic, you know. And so I think that we'll have to just start seeing other sides. But I don't know. Some days I'm feeling very calm, and then some days I'm probably am overreacting, and then some days I'm in like a fetal position. I mean, like, I don't know. Every day is different, but I do think that like the waves of emotions are drastic for a lot of folks, and I think that feels right. Feels kind of human. I don't know. What do you think? Are you overreacting?
No, well, I am asking myself this question too, and I feel that in this moment there is something missing in the way I do art, or I think about art. I also believe, like you said, that something broke, and that we have the opportunity as artists to create what I would define as a new humanism, where we put nature and man and woman at the center of our universe. Build out of that, because up to now, what has been the center of our universe has been economy, and a way in politics, and that did not work. And for me, in this moment, as an artist, what I want to do is I want to contribute. So something broke, but didn't break completely. So as an artist, I want to finish breaking it, right? Because I don't want to go back to what it was, because we all want to go back to work. Because we need the job. We need to make money. We need to survive. I understand that. But also I think that as artists, we do have this responsibility of seeing what is still standing and needs to be just destroyed. So in this way, again, as the older folks, the older artists, that we are at least in part complicit with the system that broke. I think we should really look at it and say, no, let's finish breaking it. And there's going to be a lot of manure there, right? Bad stuff. But Harold Clurman, one of the fathers of the American theater, says that out of the manure, some sprouts of genius will come, right? Because manure, nurtures makes a fertile environment. That's what I think is we need to do now. Look at what is standing, and if it's not worth it, really contribute to make a choice. No, it doesn't work. We don't want to go back to that. And then, like in the Dante Inferno, there is this figure of Charon, the person that takes you with a boat from one part to the other part. So we are like the ferry boat or the Charons that will bring the new generations into a new fertile environment. And then let the new generation create something magnificent. In a way, also protect it from the forces that will try to convince us to go back to the normal. Not the normal. The normal failed us. And if we go back to that normal, if we allow that normal to be built again, 10 years, it's going to happen again. And it can be even worse. So this is really what I believe. And also it's a more philosophical, political statement. But I think that also as artists, we have to embrace politics. But not the politics as we have had so far. So in a way, the politics that we have so far have become irrelevant. The right, the left is kind of irrelevant if you look at it. We need something new, even when we think about the politics. And again, that new has to be focusing on the person and on nature, and see if we can rebuild something that can bring us into a better way of life. And I think that artists in this moment have this role. But that's my belief, right? And that's why I'm having these conversations, because I want to hear what others.
And that's why I'm so, like, I think about performing arts as such a leader of that conversation, because when people do see performance in live, like to experience other folks' bodies and like experience viscera, when done well, like, the way in which that shifts something in you. And so me going back into the studio, it just feels like I'm excited to go play, but I'm also feeling responsible for making something that can help with the shift, or like help us navigate shifting into new territory. And also being honest that like I don't have all the answers, but at least can provide, a model or a roadmap to think through things together, or think through things together, or open up more conversations for all of us to be having. I think about Detroit, and I think about just the ways in which coronavirus, not just in Detroit, but like how it affects Black people. And something in my spirit is just like, well, you need to say something. And I don't know what that is, but like whatever that movement or that dance or that thing is, like, or you need to build something, or you need, like, something in me feels like expectant so then when we do get to that new way, after we have burned the thing down, like, then what institutions then will we need? And what are the ones that will be most necessary in places where we live? And so I'm trying to, think a little beyond, so we don't go back to how it was. Like, what will the arts, what will need to happen inside of institutions? Like, what wasn't happening before? Like, let's talk about how dance was always on the bottom of these budget you know what I mean, of the budget lines. Or there's 1,000 things we can bring up about what didn't work, but how then can we imagine institutions in that operate otherwise? And what part can I play in that as a, you know, as an independent artist? Yeah, I don't know. I've been thinking a lot too of like how siloed things are. I'm thinking even just about like in universe, like departments of how everything is blocked off from each other. And just in my conversations I've been having with friends and colleagues during this time, just there's been just a lot of crossover, or people learning that they need to like, they don't know how to farm, myself included, you know what I mean? And like how then can like all of it create an ecosystem that we can all survive on, versus like, if you are in the theater department, you know, you're on your own. Like you do a different thing than us folks over here in dance. And just thinking about how, like you were saying before, of like nature and community being at the center of the thing. And so how then can we build spaces where like that is at the core of the making? And so me too, having to like move outside of myself, like move outside of art. It's in the center, but also like, how do I invite organizers into my practice? How do I invite farmers into my practice? How do I invite, I don't know, other folks besides just artists? I think that too is a part of how the like the institutions are falling, because we had just like been so hung up on like, we are doing it this way, we're doing it better than them over there, and yeah, it's like that king of the jungle kind of attitude, which you will fall eventually, you know.
So just to also maybe to wrap up our conversation, we have been locked in our houses, and probably the information that we got were fed by the news, social media. But in Detroit, who is suffering the most? Whose human rights have been violated? Also by the administration. And again, I don't want to do a political, but it's also politics. This is also politics, right? So in Detroit, who is suffering the most?
Well, I haven't been watching the news that much, but as I scroll through my social media accounts and see, I only ever see my Black Facebook friends who are suffering loss in this city. Actually, all people in my friends in Michigan, actually, I've only seen Black people losing people. And so in terms of suffering, I don't know who is suffering the most, but when I think about the number of Black folks who have died, and most times people have like some other underlying health condition. And I think about the ways in which then these people who have died from this are shamed of their death because of like they were diabetic or had high blood pressure or whatever. But what doesn't get talked about is how, like, if you look in this surrounding area, even where I live right now, like the closest fresh food store is miles away. Folks who don't even have cars, you know what I mean? And so like prior to Corona, you were already feeding this community of people things that were killing them, and then you shame them for dying. And so I just think about how like this moment just like amplifies what so many folks already knew, what Black folks already knew. And so I think that I can't answer your question directly, but I think it's just tiring to see that like people already knew these things were true for so long, and then this like thing happens overnight and people are like, I can't believe there's food deserts in those neighborhoods. And just like people have been saying that for decades, you know what I mean? That like with the lack of resources, and then for it to all of a sudden be made visible because of a virus is it just like keeps adding salt to wounds that have just been like slowly spreading for a long time. So I think about just the word suffering. I'm linking it to Black suffering in this moment because that is what I am most familiar with. And so I think it's just what is the word? I mean, disrespectful at best, it's violent at worst, and so yeah, I for a while I wasn't even like opening up social media things. I didn't want to know that someone else had, and I haven't known anyone personally. It's always a few degrees of separation, but just to see that the person is the same in most cases, like the same age, same, you know what I mean? Like a lot of demographics are the same. And so that suffering I see most and like understand most clearly.
Well, the last question. Now you have a warehouse where to go. You're gonna bring your spring floor. You're gonna put it down.
Mm-hmm.
I see already a smile there. What you gonna do first?
So one thing I also bought was this roll of butcher paper.
Okay.
I usually like make movement scores and draw. I used to get like the wall size Post-it notes, but I didn't get this. I got I rolled butcher paper, and so I probably will like write first, or just have to have the space to spread out. Or probably just lay on that floor until I feel an impulse. I have no idea. Dance studios scare me anyway. Like I'm terrified of them because I don't know, anything could happen inside. It's like real, blank canvas type energy. I don't know. I'll report back.
Please let us.
I imagine writing first and then maybe moving.
Well, let us know the magic you will create.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time, Jen.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate these questions.